Hello and welcome to Quilt Addicts Anonymous. I'm Stephanie Soebbing. I'm so excited because it's the last day of Cape Week. We are taking a look at some quilts that we created in conjunction with FreeSpirit that use the Kaffe Classics in the Prism colorway. This is one of the, normally they do two separate colorways, dark and a hot. And this one has all the colors of the rainbow in it. So we've looked at different quilts that use different pre-cuts. We've had a fat quarter bundle, we've had a strip roll, we've had a 10-inch charm pack, and today we're going to be looking at the 5-inch charm packs. So these are really cute. They're very collectible. So if you have been collecting Kaffe charm packs for a while and you haven't known what to do with them, you absolutely can combine them all in today's quilt. But we do have quilt kits available that use the fabrics that are in this Prism Classics collection, and you're going to be able to see what it looks like today. And we're going to get on with the tutorial. And I don't know, that's usually Kaffe goes pretty quick, so there might not be any available at the time that you go to purchase, but join the wait list because these are reorderable for a little while longer. So we will bring some more in if we are sold out. The best way to know when they arrive is to join the wait list, and that gives us a good idea of how many people want it to, so we know how much to order. All right, let's get into today's tutorial. So the pattern we're making today is called Hugs and Kisses. It's one of the first patterns I designed to go with my Stashin with Stephanie subscription club. It's now only available in my book, Fat Quarter Workshop. It's a bestseller on Amazon, but we can get you a signed copy if you order from us. Now, even though it's designed to work with fat quarters, and it also can work with charm packs because we are working with a lot of 5-inch squares for this project. So what you're going to do is you're going to have a 5-inch square of your background, and you're going to have a 5-inch square from your charm pack, and we're going to create some half square triangles from that. You're going to create two types of half square triangles, some where we're pairing it with the background and some where we're pairing it with another just print fabric, but the process is the same no matter what. So we're going to go over that today. And if half square triangles intimidate you, we have a triangle masterclass that you can take. It is very in-depth. It goes over all the aspects of creating triangles, both with individual videos on different types of units, like the half square triangle, plus ones on how to put it together so you don't lose a point. We're going to cover all those techniques in the video, but if you're wanting to really get really good at triangles, that's a good series to watch. It's free to watch the videos, but there is a paid pattern if you want to follow along with the quilt that we use for it. All right, let's get started here. So you don't have to make it like we did, where we separated the colors out for the different X and O blocks. But if you want to do that, spend some time ahead of time deciding which ones are going to go with what so that you can kind of group your colors together. For this one, I'm just going to make the half square triangle where we have our print fabric and our background fabric, but again, you might need to do this with two prints as well, depending on what part of the block you're making. All right, so I'm going to flip that over with the wrong side up because we're going to mark from corner to corner. Now, I'm going to use a Sharpie so you guys can see it really well on camera. You're going to want to use something like a friction gel pen or even a pencil's fine, something that's going to go away with heat. But what I'm doing here, since this fabric is so dark, is I'm lining up the corner with or my ruler with the corners of this square, and I'm just going to mark from that center out. I like to do from the center out because if I start going from top to bottom, I find it tends to like move on me, and we don't want that to happen. All right, so we got our nice good line. I'll go over a little more so you guys can really see it at home because this is one of the darker, bolder fabrics. And what we're going to do is we are going to sew a scant 1/4 inch seam down both sides of that drawn line, and then we'll cut it apart. And the reason why I like to do it that way, instead of cutting it apart first and then sewing our 1/4 inch seam, is this is bias, so it is stretchy. So if you maybe need to clean your feed dogs, or your machine isn't as good as it could be, that can, or even if you just are tugging on the fabric a little bit, it can really distort your half square triangles, and then you don't end up with something that lays flat, or the seam maybe is doing a smiley or a frowny face instead of being straight across. And this is just a lot easier to get really good results in. Also, these are paired with shock cottons. So they are fabulous to work with. They quilt up beautifully, but it's a little bit different feel than working with your traditional quilting cotton. So we do want to take a little bit of extra care with these. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay these guys right sides together, and then we're ready to sew down one side and then back up the other. Now, if you would like to pin, you're going to want to pin across the top and across the bottom because you want to make sure you are pinning where it matters. If you pin out on the sides, these corners can really shift quite a bit on you, and then you won't have your seam going right to the corner and you're going to have a problem. Let me just go ahead and pin it. You can see what it looks like. Now, normally when we stitch, what we do is we keep the edge of our presser foot even with the edge of our fabric. What we're going to do for this is we're going to pretend that this line is the edge of our fabric. So we're going to line the edge of our presser foot up and sew all the way down one side. Then you're going to flip it around and you're going to sew all the way down the other side. Now, you can chain piece these, and I recommend that you do because that's going to make your life a lot easier in being able to get this done in an efficient way. All right, let's actually sew this. All right, so I've got my sewing machine set up to sew a scant 1/4 inch seam, which is basically 1 needle width less than a regular 1/4 inch seam. And I'm just going to stitch right down both sides of these lines. It's important not to tug on this because that can stretch out that bias seam as well. So one thing I noticed when I would teach people in person is they have a hard time maintaining that 1/4 inch seam all the way down. And sometimes it gets a little wobbly and then you don't have a flat block. So what you want to do is when you can't hang on down here anymore, you just move your hand to the side and you keep your finger going right along the side of that. And you won't get your finger with a needle or anything like that as long as you just keep it right next to it, and it'll help you maintain that 1/4 inch stitch all the way to the end. All right, so let's pretend I've done chain piece and everything. All you're gonna do is pull it out a little bit. You don't even need to break thread, and you're just gonna stitch right down the other side. Now's a good quality check time. Now, if you're doing this at home, I highly recommend that you maybe do like one if you've never done this technique before you do all of them to make sure you're doing it right. But what you want to do is you can measure the distance between your stitching lines, and it should be right at 1/2 inch or maybe a little bit less. Mine is like right on. Usually it's a little bit less, but that's going to be totally fine. What you don't want is it to be larger than 1/2 inch because then you've eaten up too much of your fabric and your block is going to end up being too small. You're going to have trouble getting it to work later. All right, so we're going to flip this over and I'm going to trim right down that line that we drew. Now you already had the accuracy from when we sewed, but you do kind of want to make sure that you're going right down that center there, because if your seam gets too tiny, then it can pop apart with use or even when it's just on the long arm getting quilted. All right, so now if we open this up, we can see that we have not one, but 2 half square triangles. So that's pretty slick. You can get it done pretty quick this way, and we're going to be able to trim these up to be absolutely perfect. But first we've got to press them open. Now 99% of the time when I am sewing triangles, I'm going to press those seams open. To do that, I just put my fingers ahead of the iron and the nose straight down that seam and go straight across. What this does is it allows you to get super flat joins, and it makes it a lot less bulk when you're putting everything together, and it really opens up the possibilities for quilting. Don't let the quilt police tell you this is going to be a problem, because it's not. I've got more than 100 quilts behind me that have all been sewn like this, and I've never had an issue. Now it's really critical that we trim this down. This is going to make sure that when we get rid of these dog ears so there's less bulk, and most importantly that it's the exact size it's supposed to be and that our seams are going right out into the corners. That's going to make putting it together a lot easier. Your blocks are going to lie really flat and you're going to have a great time at the piecing part when we're putting everything together. All right, to start, what we want to do is make sure that the 45-degree line of our ruler is going straight down that seam. If it's off, obviously this is an extreme example, but if it's off, then there is no way then you're ever going to be able to get that point going right to the corner, which is what we want. I'm making sure I've got a little bit of fabric hanging past where I need to trim. In this case, it's 4.5, and on the sides of the ruler as well. And I'm right-handed, so I'm going to cut on the right and the top first. But if you're left-handed, you're going to cut on the left and top first. Okay, so now we can see we've got our seam going straight to the corner, exactly how we want it. We're going to give it a 180-degree flip there, and we're going to line everything up again. This time I'm putting that 4.5 exactly on that edge that we just cut because that's already been trimmed. Still have that 45-degree line going right on that seam, right to the corner. That is critical. You absolutely have to do that. You also want to make sure you're using a sharp rotary blade because it can actually push the seam out of the way if you're not careful. All right, so you can see we have not trimmed off that much. It really is just slivers, but I want to show you an untrimmed one so you can see that there is a difference. There is a marked size difference. This one is definitely larger than this one. It's got extra fabric there that's going to have to be eased in somewhere and make your seams more bulky. So I know this seems tedious, and it definitely can feel like it when you have a lot to do, but it is so very important that you do not skip this step. You will have much better results and much flatter blocks. All right, I'm gonna get this one trimmed down and then we're ready to put our block together. All right, so as the pattern suggests, we have both hugs and kisses blocks, so X's and O's. We're gonna start putting the X block together. So here you can see we have some where I put together the print fabric with the background and some where we have two prints together. So you're gonna wanna make sure you're paying attention to your pattern to know what goes where. And again, you can get the Hugs and Kisses pattern in my book, Fat Quarter Workshop. You can get a signed copy from us over at shop.quiltaddictsanonymous.com. Just add it to your cart when you are getting your kit. All right, so what I want to do here is get my top row sewn together. I'm going to show you some tricks while I do that. So for this first one, we have our diagonals are going this way, which means when we are sewing these two together, we don't actually have any seams to match because we have a diagonal here and a diagonal here, but not on either side. So I can just flip these guys right sides together and sew it with a regular 1/4 inch seam without doing anything special yet. Make sure to move your seam back to that regular 1/4 inch stitch. We don't need that scant 1/4 inch seam any longer. Now I do like to lay everything back out in between here, but what I usually don't do is press until I've got my entire row together. I feel like it's more efficient. So what I would have done, we've already obviously got part of the block together here, is I would have stitched down all of these and all of these, and then I'm going to join it to create 4 separate rows. So we're going to go ahead and put these together, and I'm going to give you my tips on pinning so that these go together correctly. All right, so this one's pretty easy to tell because we've got our really clear halves. One's really light, one's really dark. So what I'm doing is I'm lining those seams up right on top of each other so that we are going in complete opposite directions there. Then I'm going to put a pin in on the right side of that seam allowance. That's going to allow me, when I'm stitching, to sew all the way down, stop with my needle down the first half of the seam allowance. It kind of acts like a pin and make sure that nothing shifts around on you. Then you're able to remove your final pin and stitch the rest of the way down. All right, now we're going to press these seams open as well. You're going to make sure that you're doing a lot of lifting and pressing with that iron because we don't want to get any of these other seams going in the wrong direction. This is where those open seams really start to pay off because it's going to be really easy to get everything lined up because we can see where all of our seam edges are and they're laying super, super flat. At this stage, I also like to give it a little spritz with my spray mister. That really helps keep everything nice and flat. I don't like to use steam in my iron because I feel like it gets the iron gross eventually. So I really prefer to just use it in my spray bottle instead. I'm able to get super flat seams, super pointy points. I mean, this is coming together absolutely perfectly. Could not ask for better. That is looking fantastic. So we cover the assembly of a block so you don't lose a point really well in our putting it together lesson in our Triangle Masterclass. So we'll cover it here, but if you want something super in depth, go check that out. It's totally free to watch. So I'm going to go ahead and flip my blocks right sides together. All right, so I've got a seam coming in right here, and it is meeting where the seam of that triangle is right at that seam allowance, and that's where I want to put my pin. Now I'm going to find where my triangle is here so I can see where I've got my seams coming in and then my seam where we've joined, and I want to put my pin in right at the tip of that triangle there as well. Now I'm pinching that pin so that it is going straight up and down. And what that does is it ensures that those points are right on top of each other so that they're in great alignment when we go to sew. Now I'm taking a second pin and I'm going to pin in the side of that seam. Now I want to point out here that these edges are not even. We have just a teeny little bit of difference between where this side of the row ends and where the one below it is. But as long as you have those points on top of each other, it doesn't matter if everything's perfect on the inside, it's going to look perfect on the outside, which is what counts. All right, here we do not have anything to match. So all I have to do is look from the top and make sure that my middle seams are right on top of each other. And they are. And again, I'm going to pin in the right side of the seam allowance. That's so I can stitch. I pin in the right side because when we're stitching, we can stitch to and leave our needle down right in that left side and then remove the pin. And that keeps everything where it should be. All right, I've got another one where I've got to do that 2-pinning method. Again, we have a whole video just on my 2-pinning method. It's part of that Triangle Masterclass if you need a little bit of a refresher on that. And it's in pretty much every video that involves triangle points as well because it gives absolutely positive results. It takes a little bit extra time, but oh man, does it look good. All right, now if you want, you can pin your sides too. I'm going to go ahead and just line those up as I sew. We're going to get this row together. All right, now that I'm sewing, I'm aiming just for the right of where those little seams came together. That way my point's going to end up right where it should be. It's a little harder to tell because Kaffe is busy, but it's worth it to look for. All right, you really have got to make sure you are pressing nicely here. We want to make sure that we are really lifting and pressing, flattening those seams out with your fingers ahead of time, and you're going to be able to get really, really flat blocks. That spray as well. And you know, it's Kaffe, it's busy, so we totally can get away with our points not being perfect in a quilt like this. But they are turning out pretty good. They're really coming together really well. And we're not losing anything. We're not chopping anything off. We don't have a point way out in no man's land because we were so far away from the seam allowance. It really is looking very nice. I'm gonna go ahead and complete this block. It's really the same technique at this point. What we're gonna do is we're just gonna flip it right sides together. And this time I've got to do the 2-pinning method at 3 locations. So 1, 2, and 3. And the center one, you're gonna wanna take your time on because you want that to be fabulous because that's where your eye is gonna go. So take your time and do it well. Now that's a good pinwheel join. I'm very happy with that. That comes from just pinning that and doing that double pinning method. This one's also very good. This one's a little off on that side, but you know what? I'm gonna call it good. It's a busy enough quilt, we'll be fine. One of the last things I like to do when I complete a block is just give the whole thing a spritz with my spray mister. I'm not gonna iron it like I would a shirt, but I am gonna work my way across with the iron just to get it really nice and flat. All right, so we've got our X block. It is looking fabulous. Now let's get our O block together. Your O block is pretty similar. The one difference, instead of being all versions of half square triangles, this one it is all going to be a background and a print half square triangle. There's going to be no print on print half square triangles. And your corner blocks are just going to be solid of your background fabric. I really love this background fabric. It's very fun because it is 2 strands woven together. So you get, instead of looking like a solid, you are getting both the very dark purpley pink and then also there's some black in there. So it really has a lot of dimension to it. It's very pretty. All right, so again, we are able to just flip these guys right sides together and pin. All right, and so we don't even need a pin. And then we'll join our centers, matching up those points, do our 2-pinning method, and get this block together. got a little bit different seam join here. So I'm gonna go ahead and show you guys that close up. I'm gonna flip these guys right sides together. Now, just like when we were putting our top seams together in the Axe block, we wanna make sure that we're matching these seams up. And what we're going to do is we're just gonna lay them so that that seam going straight out into the corners are right on top of each other. Then I'm gonna pin in that right side of the seam allowance. All the rest of them are the same as we've been doing, but we're gonna do the double pinning or matching up our seams. So whenever I'm starting with a pin like that, what I like to do is go ahead and get everything underneath my press foot and just take my first couple of stitches to secure that first half of that seam allowance. Then I remove the pin and I know that that axe is going to go straight out to the side where it's supposed to. All right, so there we've got it. We've got our axe and our O block. They're very large blocks. They're larger than your standard 12-inch block. So the quilt actually goes really pretty quickly because you don't have as many blocks to make. And again, we are using 4 charm packs from the Kaffe Prism Classics that is coming out. So this is really fun. We've got all the colors of the rainbow in one pack. It's really pretty. Here, we'll pull up the fat quarter bundle so you can get a better look at everything. We'll have some beauty shots of the final quilt when we edit this all together, but it's just so fun. And so I hope you guys have enjoyed Cape Week with us. It was really exciting to be able to work with FreeSpirit, to be able to use our patterns to help bring this collection to life. And again, if we get to this point and we are sold out, just join the wait list. It helps us know how many people are still interested and we can get some more. We aren't always able to do that. A lot of times, especially with Cape pre-cuts, it is one and done, but this one is reorderable. So make sure that you are following along with that and you can grab some more later. All right, until next time, happy quilting.